Case 1. Stephen Stainer, December 4th, 1972. Merced, California, 4 p.m. 7-year-old Stephen Gregory Stainer was walking home from school. The route was routine, the kind of walk a kid in a small Central Valley farming town took 100 times without a second thought, through almond groves and quiet roads with neighbors who waved from their driveways. He never made it home. A man named Kenneth Eugene Parnell had been circling the area. He'd enlisted a local drifter named Irvin Murphy as an accomplice, coaching him to pose as a minister collecting donations for a church. They pulled alongside Stephen on the road and told him they needed a young boy to help with an errand. They offered him a ride. Stephen got in. Parnell drove him 38 miles to a remote cabin in Mariposa County. That night, he told Stephen something that would define the next 7 years of his life: that his parents no longer wanted him, that they had signed over custody, and that he would now be living with Parnell under a new name. His new name was Dennis Parnell. Stephen was 7 years old. He did not know where he was. He believed what he was told. Back in Merced, his family waited, then searched, then pleaded publicly for information. A retired police officer named Al Glatt volunteered to work the case full-time without pay. His parents kept every present from the Christmas he missed, wrapped and stacked, certain he was coming back. For 7 years, those presents sat unopened. Parnell moved Stephen around California, Cathy's Valley, then north to Ukiah in Mendocino County. He enrolled him in schools under the false name. He told teachers the boy was his son. Behind that manufactured identity, Stephen endured years of manipulation, control, isolation, and trauma that would follow him long after he was finally free. As Stephen entered his teenage years, something shifted in Parnell. His attention moved elsewhere, and in February 1980, Parnell recruited a teenage boy named Sean Poorman and ordered him to find a new child. On February 13th, 1980, Poorman grabbed 5-year-old Timmy White from outside his home in Ukiah while the boy was playing alone. He shoved him into Parnell's car over the child's screams. Timmy White was 5 years old. He'd been missing less than 24 hours when Parnell began trying to rename him Tommy. Stephen Stainer was 14 when Timmy arrived. He had spent 7 years enduring what Parnell had done to him. He looked at this 5-year-old boy, screaming, terrified, asking for his parents, and made a decision. He was not going to let this happen to someone else. On the night of March 1st, 1980, while Parnell was working an overnight security shift, Stephen took Timmy by the hand and walked out of the cabin. They hitchhiked 40 miles to Ukiah. Stephen walked into the local police station carrying the 5-year-old and said words that would become the title of the television movie made about his life. "I know my first name is Stephen." Kenneth Parnell was arrested hours later at his hotel. He was convicted of 2 counts of kidnapping in 1981 and sentenced to 7 years in prison. He served 5, less time than he had held Stephen captive. Stephen Stainer spent the rest of his life trying to return to ordinary life. He married. He had 2 children. He gave interviews and advocated for missing children's awareness. On September 16, 1989, at the age of 24, he was struck and killed by a car while riding his motorcycle in Merced. He had been home 9 years. Timmy White became a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy. In April 2010, he died of a pulmonary embolism at the age of 35. He left behind a wife and 2 children. The boy who was saved grew up to save others. The boy who saved him had 7 years stolen and 9 years back before the road took him too. Where does that math leave a family? Case 2. Carlina White, August 4th, 1987. Harlem Hospital Center, New York City. 2:30 a.m. Joy White and Carl Tyson had rushed their 19-day-old daughter to the hospital that night. Baby Carlina had developed a fever and an infection from fluid she had swallowed during birth. She was placed in the pediatric unit on intravenous antibiotics. Her parents were told to go home and rest. They stepped out sometime after 2:30 a.m., between 2:30 and 3:55 a.m. During a shift change, someone walked out of that unit with their daughter. The woman had been noticed before. Staff and patients later recalled her loitering around the pediatric unit for weeks, sometimes days at a time, before the night Carlina disappeared. She had introduced herself to Joy White and Carl Tyson. She had sat with them. She had comforted them while their infant daughter was being treated. She had no identification as a hospital employee. The hospital had no surveillance cameras trained on that corridor. The woman's name was Ann Petway. She lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut. She had told friends and family she was pregnant. In late July 1987, she left town for several days. She came back with a baby girl she said was hers. She raised the child as Nedra Nettie Nance. Carlina spent her entire childhood in Bridgeport and later Georgia, believing Ann Petway was her mother. She did not question it. Why would she? The questioning began in 2005, when Carlina was 18 and pregnant with her own child. She asked Ann for her birth certificate. Ann stalled, then refused, then acted in ways Carlina later described as suspicious. Carlina went to the Connecticut Vital Records office to request the document herself. They told her no records existed under her name. A clerk accused her of trying to manufacture a false identity and reported her to Child Protective Services. She kept searching. For 5 years, she searched. In 2010, she expanded her search to the Internet. She found the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children website. She browsed by birth year. She found a photo of a baby girl abducted from Harlem Hospital in August 1987. Her birth year, the year she believed she was born, and next to it a forensic age progression of what that baby might look like as an adult. She recognized herself. She called the NCMEC hotline and reported her own kidnapping. DNA testing confirmed she was Carlina White. On January 13, 2011, after 23 years and 5 months, the longest child abduction case ever resolved in NCMEC history, Carlina was reunited with Joy White and Carl Tyson. Ann Petway surrendered to authorities days later. She had suffered multiple miscarriages over the years before taking Carlina. She pleaded guilty to kidnapping charges and was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Carlina's case became the first in NCMEC's history where the kidnapping victim led the reunification effort herself. She spent 23 years being told she was someone else. What does a person do with that? Who do you become once you know? Case 3. Baby Holly, January 12, 1981. A wooded area along Wallaceville Road, Houston, Texas. A man walking his German Shepherd found 2 bodies in the undergrowth. They had been there for weeks, perhaps longer. One was a man who had been beaten to death. The other was a young woman who had been strangled. Neither carried identification. Neither was reported missing in the immediate area. For nearly 40 years, they were listed in the Harris County coroner's files as a John Doe and a Jane Doe. In October 1980, Harold Dean Klaus Jr., 21, and his wife Tina Gail Lynn Klaus, 17, had left their home in Louisville, Texas, with their infant daughter, Holly Marie. They had been drawn into a nomadic religious group operating across California, Texas, and Arizona, described by witnesses as robed individuals who moved through Yuma and other towns asking strangers for food. The last communication their families received came by phone call from someone identifying herself as Sister Susan in Los Angeles. She told the Klaus family that Harold and Tina had joined a religious group and no longer wished to have contact with anyone from their former life. When the family arranged to collect Harold's car, they met several robed members of the group at the Daytona International Speedway. They called police. The members were briefly taken into custody, then released. No one knew a baby was involved. Holly was approximately a year old when two women from the group dropped her off at a church in Yuma, Arizona. She was adopted and raised under a different name. She grew up in Oklahoma. She had 5 children. She had no reason to believe any part of the story she'd been told about herself was false. In late 2021, a genetic genealogy firm called Identifinders International completed DNA analysis on the unidentified remains from 1981. The two bodies were identified as Harold Dean Klaus Jr. and Tina Gail Lynn Klaus. Their families, who had not heard from them since October 1980, were contacted. The family's first question was one investigators hadn't expected. What happened to the baby? No one had known there was a baby. Law enforcement had no record of an infant. No remains of a child had been found near the bodies. Holly had simply vanished into the gap. A case was immediately opened with NCMEC. A missing poster was distributed. A forensic age progression was created showing what Holly might look like at 42. In June 2022, investigators located Holly at her workplace in Oklahoma. They brought her in to explain what they had found. Hours later, she was on a video call with her biological grandmother and her aunts and uncles, people she had never known existed. It is such a blessing to be reassured that she is all right and has had a good life, her Aunt Cheryl Klaus said. The whole family slept well last night. The murders of Harold and Tina Klaus remain unsolved. Holly has since written a book titled Finding Baby Holly, Lost to a Cult, Surviving My Parents' Murders, and Saved by Prayer. The Texas Attorney General's Cold Case Unit continues to investigate. If you have information about the murders of Harold and Tina Klaus, contact the Texas Attorney General at babyhollytips@oag.texas.gov. 2 parents were killed and their child was carried away, and nobody missed the child for 40 years because nobody knew she existed. Is justice even a word that applies to a case like that? Case 4. Camilla Mobley, July 10, 1998. University Medical Center, Jacksonville, Florida. Morning. Shannara Mobley was 16 years old when she gave birth to her daughter that morning. The baby was healthy. Shannara named her Camilla Teresiah Tasha Mobley. 8 hours later, Camilla was gone. The woman who took her had been in the hospital since before the birth, roaming corridors in blue floral scrubs and green scrub pants, carrying a pocketbook, speaking to staff and patients alike. She introduced herself to Shannara. She sat with the teenage mother and kept her company during the long hours of waiting. Around 3 p.m., she told Shannara she needed to take the baby to check her temperature and that she'd be back in a few minutes. She walked out of the ward with Camilla in her arms and never came back. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office descended on the hospital. Helicopters circled the building. Every visitor was stopped. Bus lines were halted. Airport police were put on alert. Trains leaving Jacksonville were searched row by row. Over the next 18 years, more than 2,500 tips would come in to investigators. None led anywhere. The woman's name was Gloria Williams, 33 years old at the time of the abduction. She lived in Walterboro, South Carolina. She had recently suffered a miscarriage. She had lost custody of her 2 young sons. She drove from South Carolina to Jacksonville, walked into University Medical Center, and came home with a baby girl she named Alexis Kelly Manigo. She raised her as her own. Camilla grew up in Walterboro, not knowing any other reality. Williams provided for her, cared for her, took her to church. Camilla was, by most accounts, loved. But as she grew older, she began to notice things that didn't add up. Inconsistencies in stories, the absence of documents that should have existed. reactions from Williams that didn't match the questions being asked. At some point before she turned 18, Camilla Mobley learned the truth about who she was. She kept that knowledge to herself for over a year. Gloria Williams was the only mother she had ever known. On January 13th, 2017, the NCMEC received two anonymous tips, believed to have originated from Camilla herself, pointing investigators to Walterboro, South Carolina. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office found Camilla alive and well, living with Williams. DNA testing confirmed her identity that day. "She's taking it as well as you can imagine," Sheriff Mike Williams said at a press conference. "She has a lot to process. I can't even begin to comprehend it." Gloria Williams was arrested and charged with kidnapping and interference with custody. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison on June 8, 2018, with 511 days credited for time served. Shanara Mobley later settled a lawsuit against the hospital for $1.5 million. Camilla, who sometimes goes by Alexis, lives between Florida and South Carolina. She has spoken publicly about the complexity of her situation, that she loves the woman who took her, and that she also knows what that woman took from her, and that both things are true at the same time. 8 hours old. What does it mean to be stolen before you even know you exist? Case 5. Sean Hornbeck. October 6th, 2002. Richwoods, Missouri. 1 p.m. Sunday. 11-year-old Sean Hornbeck climbed onto his lime green mountain bike and headed toward a friend's house. He took the same route he always took along Highway H, rural, quiet, familiar. The kind of road in a small town where neighbors knew each other by name. A white pickup truck stopped ahead of him. The driver, a 41-year-old pizza shop manager named Michael Devlin, stepped out. He knocked Sean off his bike, forced him into the truck, and told him he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Then he drove away. By nightfall, Sean's family knew something was wrong. By the next morning, the search had begun in earnest. His parents, Pam and Craig Akers, deployed volunteers, hired private investigators, set up a foundation in Sean's name, and depleted their savings. Craig quit his job as a software designer to work the case full-time. They borrowed against their retirement. They listened to psychics. They left no lead unfollowed. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Sean was alive 55 miles away in Michael Devlin's apartment in the St. Louis suburb of Kirkwood. Devlin held Sean there for 4 years and 3 months. He abused him. He threatened to kill him if he attempted to contact anyone or escape. He enrolled Sean in a local school under a false name. He allowed him to go outside, sometimes alone, to ride his bike through the neighborhood. People saw Sean. Some spoke to him. No one recognized him. In the neighborhood, Devlin introduced him as his godson. Sean walked past missing child posters displaying his own age-progressed image and said nothing. As Sean aged into his teens, Devlin began looking for a younger victim. On January 8, 2007, he abducted 13-year-old Ben Ownby at a school bus stop in Beaufort, Missouri. This time, something went differently. A 15-year-old witness named Mitchell Holtz saw the white truck speeding away from the bus stop with Ben inside and memorized the description. That description led investigators to Devlin. On January 12, 2007, FBI agents came to his Kirkwood apartment to question him about Ben Ownby. Devlin opened the front door. Inside, 2 boys were sitting together playing video games. One was Ben Ownby, missing for 4 days. The other called himself Sean Devlin. It was Sean Hornbeck. He had been missing for 4 years and 3 months. Michael Devlin was sentenced to multiple consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. The discovery was called the Missouri Miracle. Pam Akers said her son is frozen in her memory as an 11-year-old boy, reporters wrote. She had not known whether she would ever see him again. She had spent 4 years imagining what he looked like now. Now she knew. He walked past his own missing poster dozens of times. That is not a failure of courage, and it is what years of isolation and terror and control does to a person. Who decides when someone trapped in that situation should have done more? Case 6. J.C. Dugard. On the morning of June 10th, 1991, an 11-year-old girl named J.C. Lee Dugard disappeared on her way to her school bus stop in South Lake Tahoe, California. A witness saw her enter a gray vehicle but was unable to intervene in time. The individuals responsible were a married couple, Philip and Nancy Garrido. Philip Garrido had a prior criminal record and was on parole at the time. JC was taken to the couple's property in Antioch, California, where she was held in a concealed structure on the grounds. She remained there for 18 years. During that time, she had 2 children, who were 15 and 11 years old when the case was finally resolved. Law enforcement visited the property on multiple occasions over the years, but the situation went undetected. The case broke in 2009 when a routine encounter between Garrido and officers at UC Berkeley raised enough concern to prompt a formal investigation. That investigation led to JC's discovery and release. She was 29 years old. Both Philip and Nancy Garrido received prison sentences. The state of California later reached a $20 million settlement with JC, acknowledging failures in oversight. She has since written a memoir and established a foundation supporting survivors of trauma. "There's not only one kind of strength," she said. "It comes in many forms." Case 7. Alex Batty, September 30th, 2017, United Kingdom. 11-year-old Alex Batty from Oldham, Greater Manchester, left England with his mother, Melanie Batty, and his grandfather, David Batty, for a planned one-week holiday to Malaga, Spain. His legal guardian, his grandmother, Susan Caruana, had approved the trip. Alex was expected home on October 8th, 2017. He did not come home. Melanie Batty did not have legal parental guardianship of Alex. Susan Caruana had raised him. When he failed to return from Spain, she reported him missing. Greater Manchester Police launched an investigation. Spanish authorities were engaged. Arrest warrants were issued for Melanie and David Batty. They had already disappeared into Europe. For 6 years, nothing. What investigators would later learn: Melanie and David Batty moved the boy through Morocco, then Spain, then France, living an off-the-grid life, as Alex himself later described it, in communes, caravans, and temporary spiritual communities scattered across the Pyrenees. Alex was not in school. He had no access to conventional health care. He was kept apart from the world he'd known. At 14, he decided he wanted to leave. It took him 3 more years to act on it. The catalyst was a plan by his mother to relocate the group to Finland. Alex later told investigators he felt that if they went to Finland, the chance would be gone. So, on the night of December 12th, 2023, he left. He packed a backpack, grabbed a skateboard, took a flashlight, and walked out at 3 a.m. into the foothills of the Pyrenees near the small French town of Chalabre. He walked the dark road for some time until a delivery driver named Fabien Accidini, en route to deliver medication to a local pharmacy, came across him on the side of the road. The driver stopped. He took Alex in. He drove him to police. "He told me he was kidnapped by his mother 5 years ago in Morocco," Accidini said. "He said he was in Spain. After that, he was in France. He decided to flee the community in which he lived." Greater Manchester Police confirmed Alex's identity on December 14th, 2023. He returned to the United Kingdom on December 16th and went home to his grandmother Susan in Oldham. He had been missing for 6 years, 2 months, and 6 days. A criminal investigation into child abduction was opened. then closed in 2024. Alex's family did not support a prosecution. Melanie and David Batty remain wanted but have not been located. Alex has since spoken publicly about his experience. He has described his mother not as a monster, but as someone with beliefs he came to disagree with. Someone who loved him but chose those beliefs over his welfare. He walked out of the mountains at 3 a.m. with a skateboard and a flashlight. At what age does a child become responsible for their own escape? Case 8. Kayla Unbehorn, July 4, 2017, South Elgin, Illinois. 9-year-old Kayla Unbehorn spent the 4th of July holiday with her mother, Heather Unbehorn, for what was supposed to be a supervised visit. Heather did not have custody of Kayla. Earlier that year, a court had granted sole custody to Kayla's father, Ryan Iserka, citing Heather's erratic behavior. Heather was permitted supervised visits only. Kayla's father went to pick her up the next day, July 5, 2017. Heather and Kayla were gone. A felony kidnapping warrant was issued for Heather Unbehorn on July 28, 2017. Investigators followed multiple leads over the following years. Nothing materialized. 6 years passed. In November 2022, Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries aired an episode titled Abducted by a Parent, which examined cases of parental abductions. Kayla was not the central focus of the episode. She appeared at the end, briefly, in a roll call of missing children, her school photo next to a forensically age-progressed image of what she might look like at 15. The episode reached millions of viewers. One of them was a woman shopping at Plato's Closet, a consignment clothing store at the Westgate Regional Shopping Center in Asheville, North Carolina. On the evening of Saturday, May 13, 2023, she looked at the teenage girl in the store and recognized her from the image at the end of that episode. She told a store employee. The employee called the police. Asheville Police Department officers arrived at 7:26 p.m. They made contact with the girl and the woman accompanying her. They confirmed the identification of Heather Unbehorn and the minor child in her custody. Kayla Unbehorn, now 15, had been found. She and her mother had been living off the grid in Asheville for an unknown period of time, having apparently avoided any traceable digital footprint for nearly 6 years. What's most unusual is the ability to stay off the grid for that period of time, Asheville Police Lieutenant Jonathan Brown said. Typically, we leave a technological breadcrumb, and those are very easy and quick to be tracked. Heather Unbehorn was arrested and charged with felony child abduction. She posted $250,000 bond. Ryan Iserka, Kayla's father, issued a statement through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I'm overjoyed that Kayla is home safe. We ask for privacy as we get to know each other again and navigate this new beginning. Kayla's image appeared for perhaps 30 seconds at the end of a television episode. That was enough. Callahan Walsh at NCMEC said it simply, "Media is so important when it comes to the recovery of missing children." In this case, a roll call that most viewers probably scrolled past brought a teenager home. What other faces are still in those databases, waiting for the right person to look twice? 8 children. 8 impossibly different stories. And yet they share something. They share the years that didn't stop while the search slowed down, the birthdays that came and went, the parents who kept the lights on, or the bedroom door open, or the candles lit, not because it was rational, but because stopping felt like a door they couldn't close. And 8 times, after everyone had reason to give up, the door opened. Baby Holly is a mother of 5 in Oklahoma. Carlina White reunited with her birth parents after 23 years. J.C. Dugard built a foundation in her daughters' names. Stephen Stainer came home and spent 9 years trying to find ordinary life before a road took him. Kamaya Mobley, also known as Alexis, is still deciding who she wants to be. Sean Hornbeck walked out of a Kirkwood apartment after 4 years and 3 months and began the long process of becoming someone who wasn't defined by what happened to him. Alex Batty walked out of the Pyrenees at 3 a.m. with a flashlight and found his grandmother. Kayla Unbehawn came home because someone recognized a face on a screen. 8 times the phone rang and someone on the other end said, "We found your child. They're alive." That call came. It does not always come. If you have information about a missing child, contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST, 1-800-84-35678. That's all 8 cases. And if this video gave you something to think about, something that doesn't resolve cleanly, something that stays with you, that's exactly what it was supposed to do. If you're new to this channel, welcome. We cover the cases that demand more than a headline, the ones where the system is part of the story, the ones where the answers are harder than the questions. Subscribe now if you haven't. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next.